Hello, everybody. Sunday Adelaja here. I'm back to you to talk about why are Black African people backward. Because everybody will be saying, okay, if all these things you are saying is true, but why are we backward? What is the reason? If all these things are true, why now? Why is this happening now? Why are we not anywhere right now? Why is it that we are backward right now? So that's what I'm going to talk about. But the series is, of course, are Black African people cursed? Nope. Nope. They are a blessing to the world. And the greater blessing you are, the more oppressed you will be. So, but the topic of today, go and share it, share, is why Black African people are backward. Why Black African people are backward. Why are Black African people backward? So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, why Black African people are backward. So first of all, the reason why I personally believe that African people are backward is when you read the Bible, you will see all the words that God said that if you don't serve the Lord your God, if you do witchcraft, if you do idol worshiping, idolatry, if you do idolatry, that all these curses will come upon you and you will be devastated, you will be enslaved. So actually, I thought about this when I was teaching about temple cleansers and idol smashers. If you listen to that series on temple cleansers and idol smashers, I made a lot of points. There are many messages from the Bible that I refer to and about what God said about idolatry and about idol worshiping. That when you are when you worship something else other than God Almighty, that you will be enslaved. One of the punishments for idol worshiping is slavery. So the devastation that African people have been going through, and this, including slavery, is as a result of the fact that we were worshiping, our grandfathers and grandparents were idol worshippers, and they were seeking to worship God in their own way. And so idol worshiping and and witchcraft and all those things led to the downfall of the African empire. Now, of course, there are reasons why nations fail. I have a book on that. Why nations fail, or what do I call it? Why nations die? Why nations die? I call it. So I have a book on that. Why nations die, and why countries fail. So and there are other people who have written books on why countries and nations fail. So there are a lot of factors that we could talk about, but I will talk about this main factor, that we didn't worship the Lord our God. We didn't, the same thing happened to Israel and the nation of Israel and the Jews. They also were abandoned and they were enslaved and scattered because they also went into idol worshiping. And you will see that the same thing happened to Roman Empire. All empires that have been great in the past, whenever they become complacent and they begin to indulge in themselves and in self-glory and self-worship, in idolatry, they are ashamed and they are covered in shame and disgraced. So that is what has happened to our Black people, and enslaved also. But this is to humble us and to make us come back to the Lord our Creator. But of course, there were other external factors that were used by Satan or by the enemy to bring us to where we are today. But I don't want to behave like somebody that is not informed. I don't want to be one of those people who just blame the colonization or the slavery for the destiny and the plight of Black people today. Yes, it is true that the explorers and colonizers and slave masters contributed immensely, and they were used by Satan to bring us to where we are today. But you can't blame anyone for it. I don't think that is the reason. I think those are just the process and the consequences of our lack of relationship with the God of heaven. So So I don't want you to, even though I'm going to bring out all the facts of history, that the documented facts of history of how other regions devastated Africa, but my heart is not to blame or put a blame or hatred or anger on any nation at all or any part of the world. Is to put it on ourselves that it is because we walked away from the principles and the truth of our Creator, and we were indulged in witchcraft, idol worship, and all that, and that's what led to where we are, where we found ourselves. Even though other people were used by Satan as agents, but I will not blame the blame on them. So here we go. Are black African people cursed? Nope. Why black African people are backward? So let's talk about that. So I told you already about the civilization that led to the civilization of Egypt. So the first civilization in the world is the civilization of Ethiopia, of Nubia civilization, or Kush civilization. Or from the Bible, if you are going to go through the history of the Bible, it is the Kush civilization came from, was developed mightily by Nimrod. So Nimrod was actually the very first person that built empires and conquered the world, the then known world, according to the Bible. And that Nimrod is a son of Kush. So it's a black civilization. But that civilization later gave birth to many civilizations, but main of them was the Kushite civilization or the Ethiopian civilization. But at that time, you must know that Ethiopia was referred to as the whole of Africa, black continent, black people. Or when you look at Kush also means black people. So black. So when we're talking about that, you will also know that I will also show you in this place, in this teaching today, that Egypt was always black before, long before Arabs. Because when you look at Egypt today, you almost think that it has always been like that. That because the Arabs are the ones that are living there now, you will always think that Egypt was always been Arab. No. Arabs are the most recent people to come to live in Egypt. Before Arabs, there have been other nations and other nationalities that were living in Egypt, but the very first people whom Egypt belonged to were black people, and the ones who built Egypt pyramid that we all know today, the pyramid we are talking about, these things were built by black people. And how do we know that? Because it was first built in Nubia, in the present day Sudan, and those are the blackest of the black. If you are talking about black people, that's where you find them. So that is where the pyramids started, and there are still over 200 pyramids that are still there up to now, and in Egypt only 70. So they are, that is a proof that they started there and then they moved forward. I mean, they moved northward, and that's why a lot of the pharaohs who are buried in the pyramids are black. So, nobody even argues about that anyway. So the earlier inhabitants of Egypt are black people. And these black people, so they took the civilization from Nubia to the north in Egypt, and then to the east in Ethiopia, present-day Ethiopia or East Africa, and then to Nigeria. That's where my people connect this ancestry from, that they are coming from the east. They are coming from Sudan. So, and the archaeological proof in Yoruba land to prove that as well. So after Egypt was captured by Persians, so what happened was that, the very first people, so Egypt was black till this period, 525 BC, but they were conquered. There was a war that led to their conquest by the new civilization, one of the new civilizations that was rising at that point. Because the black people are spread to even those areas, but they had over the centuries, they had mixed up and they had become their own nations. So now they were conquering also. So they came to conquer, because that Persia used to be under the dominion of Egypt. But when they became powerful, they wanted their own freedom. So they came to fight and they conquered Egypt. So it was from there that other nations and other nationalities started moving to to manage and to rule over the land that they have conquered. And that's how you started seeing other people apart from black people mixing up. So that is long before the Arabs. The Persians that time were not Arabs at all. They were not even Muslims. There was no Muslim, nothing like that at this time. So after Egypt was captured by Persians in 525 BC, a series of other foreign occupations followed. After Persians, after Persians, the Macedonians came and conquered also Egypt, because the Macedonians also became a new civilization that became stronger. They became stronger than Persians. They overcame them, but these are hundreds of years that have passed. So over that period of time, the Persians have mixed together with the black people. You know, they have become lighter in complexion. Then the Macedonians came, and the Macedonians were like Europeans, so they also mixed together for a few hundreds of years. Then the greatest devastation and the greatest conquerors and dominion of black people in North Africa, all those North Africa cities were all black. But especially during the time of Roman Empire, when the Roman Empire, you know, was ruling, they conquered also Egypt and all other places, and they are all citizens, Europeans and from Greek people, and Romans came and settled in North Africa. So those are the things that led to, you know, devastation. A lot of, I'm going to go through them in processes just for you to know how we now have, you know, light-skinned people living in the North Africa. And then it was only after after Julius Caesar, after the Romans, that Arabs now came. Arabs came much later. Arabs came like, you know, hundreds of years after. So the place was already a mixture of different people when Arabs came. Then when the Arabs came, thanks to the warrior spirit of Islamic warriors, they conquered the North Africa, and then they brought their own Arab people up to today. That is why we're having those North African people as Arabs more, because the people who were there originally, both the blacks and the Romans and the, you know, Persians and the Macedonians, all of them are now mixed together. They don't even, nobody remember where they're coming from anymore. But the Arabs became the ruler. They imposed Islam upon them, and so everybody just see themselves as, first of all, they were calling them Berbers, but now everybody called themselves by their name of the country, as Europeans have divided them, because after the Arabs, then the English people came in British Empire and they divided the place, and so a whole lot of stories. So just for you to see some of the outward influence that brought Africa to the place where it is today. But these are the earlier history. That's why I started with this one. So numerous libraries, before all these times, there were numerous libraries and cultural sites all over Africa, especially in places like Dahomey, that is like Benin Republic, Yoruba area. Then there is Sango in Mali. Then there is you know, all kind of empires all over Ghana. In Ghana, they had empires. So there were so many empires in Western Africa and Southern Africa also, Zulu and all those people. And they had libraries, and Mali, they have libraries and cultural centers in all those places, but they were all destroyed as a result of conquest. And you can understand that, because conquest is war, is destruction, is death. So from the 8th to the 19th century, Africans were, can you imagine how many centuries? Centuries. Africans were sold as slaves to Islamic countries. So that's like for 11 centuries. For 11 centuries. Not decades, centuries. Africans were sold. This is not to the West right now, but this is just to the Arab kind of countries, because they were the last conquest of Africa. So in 1498, Portuguese ships, this is when the Europeans have started their own now, Portuguese ships sailed to the shores of East Africa. Local inhabitants showed them plenty hospitality, believing in their decency, and brought them many gifts. But what actually happened was Portuguese were examining the lands. In 1505, Francisco de Almeida, the first Portuguese viceroy of India, that is of the territory from South Africa to Southeast Asia, sent a fleet of 21 ships to conquer the land discovered by previous expeditions. Since then, importation of African slaves into Western Europe began. See, this is what was happening. They were hacking them down. These were all drawings from the old time. From the 15th to the 19th century, Europeans were conducting the Atlantic slave trade. At the end of the 15th century, Portuguese de facto controlled the west coast of Africa, where they started active slave trade. They were followed by other Europeans, the Dutch, the French, the English. All of them went to conquer Africa. See what was happening here. This is the map for slave trade from Africa to the Americas. From 1650 to 1860, the Europeans started their own trade. Not as many, not as long as the Arabs, but see how many people they managed to take. They took 4.5 million people to West Indies, and right now only about the same amount of people are still there. You know, because they were working them to death. They were killing them, they were working them to death. If 4.5 million people were taken since, you know, like 400 years ago, that 4.5 million is supposed to have become minimum, like, because this 4.5 million, there was no, that this was even much more than the amount of people that was in Nigeria. At this point, Nigeria was just about 1 million people, Nigeria that we know now, or 2 million people. So, you know, if the Nigeria of 2 million people, that is 400 years ago, Nigeria of 2 million people has become 200 million now. So, which means that multiply this 500 million, I mean, 4.5 million by 100. That is how much Nigeria has grown. So, if you multiply this by 100, it will be almost 500 million people. Or 500 million people. So in that West Indies, there are supposed to be 500 million Africans living there. But because they were working them to death till they crash and die, right now less than 4 million people are in the whole of the Western Indies. Okay, for example, let's compare it to the US, where they also work them to death. Only 500,000 people was taken to America. And that 500,000 today has become almost 20 million people, black people, 20 million. So 500,000 has become 20 million. That is like, yeah, that's the same 100 times. It has multiplied. But there it has reduced 100 times. Then to Europe, it's even worse, because 300,000 were sent to Europe. But today, you don't even see any of their descendants in Europe anymore. You only see the black people that are going to Europe now. It's even worse than in the West Indies. You can't see black people, that original black people that were taken there 300, 400 years ago. They have disappeared. They have vanished. And then a lot of them were taken to South America. So we have 5 million taken to Brazil. Can you imagine if the 5 million that were taken to Brazil is multiplied by 100 right now? It's almost going to be 1 billion people just in Brazil alone. It's supposed to be at least 1 billion black people in Brazil. But today, you know, even though there are still a bit many there, but it's nothing compared to what it could have been. Okay, the other side of South America, Central America, we have almost 1 million people sent there. 5.5 and 2, they are supposed also to be at least 100 million people there who are blacks. But you see, they will never allow black people to grow. All these places are supposed to be black. All these people are supposed to be at least 1 billion people. In the Americans, it's supposed to be at least 1 billion people who are Africans. But right now, you can hardly count 50 million from 1 billion people. Sad. And in Europe, no way. Between 1650 and 1860, approximately 15 million. If you multiply that 15 million by 100, which is the rate that people who are not tampered with have grown, if you multiply that, that is 1.5 billion people of black people are supposed to be living all over the world, apart from Africa itself. 1.5. So it's supposed to be the same population as Africa, I mean, even more than Africa is today. But this 1.5, these 15 million are the only ones that were removed from West Africa. If you now combine that with another 15 million that were removed from, actually more than 15 million that were removed from East Africa, because East Africa mostly were removed by Arabs, and it was more than 15 million of them were removed from East Africa especially. And you know what? In Arab countries, it's even worse. You cannot even find 1 million black people in all the Arab countries. They castrated them. They didn't allow them to give birth. They just killed and destroyed all of them. So black African people are supposed to be 1 billion, I mean 1.5 billion people in the Americans, about 1 billion people in Europe, and about 1 billion people in the Arab countries. This is how much devastation has happened to black people. So why is it that why black people are supposed to have black people are supposed to be more than Chinese? Black people are supposed to be double of Chinese and Indians. Black people are supposed to be the largest group of people in the world, because that is where the world started. That is where civilization started. People started growing from there. But if not because of the crime of Europeans and Arabs, black people would have been the largest number of people in the whole world, the largest population of people. Now, what were they doing? How did they use them so bad that they were dying like that? Okay, they were using them to cultivate tobacco, coffee, cotton, sugar, mining, rice, just anything that animals later on will be doing. Cattle, this is the work of cattle. They were using them to do it and killing them for it. It is estimated that in total 15 million African slaves were sent to European colonies in America. But for every living black slave, there were 3 or 4 black slaves who died during manhunt. This is when they were running away. So that is another way they died. So a lot of them died through hard labor, but a lot of them were killed for trying to run away. And through transportation, even almost half of them were killed on the way in the ocean. Approximately 1.2 to 2.4 million Africans died during transportation across the Atlantic Ocean. Even more died after arrival on the land. So let's say 5 million people died. And that is, if you multiply that by 100 now, throughout all those 400 years, it's supposed to be 100. That's 500 million people that were lost just through this kind of thing. Transportation. The Atlantic slave trade existed. So can you imagine if the slave trade had not happened, we would have been another China. And see how China, exploded when civilization came to them. Now they are the biggest economy in the world almost, just because of manpower they have. And it was one nation. Africans would have been one nation like that too. The Atlantic slave trade existed in Africa for more than 300 years. And the demand for actually 400 years. That's just the European ones. But for Arabs, it existed for 1,000 years, 1,100 years. The slavery of Africans. And the demand for African slaves stimulated its progress. The progress of slavery, that is to say. So let's look at this advertisement, for example, from a cargo that just arrived in America from Sierra Leone. So let's hear the way the announcement. It's just like when you go to let's say you go to Liverpool, that's where they were arriving. The cargo just arrived, and when you get there, or maybe to New York, for example, you get there, you see advertisement, just like you see advertisements of car things. These advertisements, you see advertisements like this in the streets. So let's read what are the things they write in the advertisement. They said for sale or to be sold on Thursday, on this day, the third day of, they write the date, a cargo of 94 prime healthy Negroes, consisting of 39 men, 15 boys, 24 women, and 16 girls just arrived from Sierra Leone. So contact David and John Diaz for sale. 39 men, 15 boys, even boys, 24 women, 16 girls for sale. And who are the people buying these people? These are people who needed people to work in their farm. The people who needed someone to cultivate their tobacco field, coffee field, cotton field, sugar, mining, rice field, all those things. That is why those are the people buying them. So the African peoples weakened by slave trade greatly. They were not given a chance to recover even after the abolition of slave trade, as it was followed by the European colonization of Africa. In the second half of the 19th century, especially after the Berlin Conference in 1884, the process of colonization of Africa acquired such a scale that it was called the race or the fight for Africa, or the scramble. They actually call it scramble for Africa. By 1900, apart from the remaining, let me first of all tell you what happened in that conference. Berlin Conference 1884 is where the major superpowers of the time, the major European powers, came together and took the map of Africa and put it on the ground. That time there were no countries. Africa was not divided into countries or borders. No border, just a happy continent that were living in their domains and by empire and their nations and their cities. So they took it, and because they had, by this time, Africa was in recession because of what I said, the idolatry and things like that, and the Arabs and the slave trade of Arabs had reduced the strength of Africa greatly. So this time Europe has become great again. Before then they were the last in development. So now they had conquered the Arabs, and they now saw that the whole continent is their virgin. So they gathered together, all of them, Britain, Belgium, Germany, France, Portugal, Spain, they all gathered, and Netherlands, and they started, they put the map on the table, and depending on their power, on their influence, and on their who was having more influence as a nation, they started dividing the continent. And that is how we started having these countries with borders. And, you know, Cameroon, Nigeria, all those names were given by these people. Many of them. The borders were because for their own interest. And why were they dividing them? So that they would take all the resources and the raw materials and the wealth and build Europe. So as a result of that, Europe was hugely built and quickly built into civilization. In 1900, apart from the remaining independent Ethiopia and Liberia, almost the entire continent was divided between a number of European states: Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and slightly expanded their old colonies. In early 1889, Russian colonists led by NIKOLAI IVANOVICH ASHINOV tried to acquire territories on the coast of Somalia and reserve them for the Russian Empire. But France, claiming these territories, expelled the Russian colonists. But Russia is one of the only superpower that time that never colonized Africa. So when people say Russians are our enemy today, no, they are the only ones that never really participated in that conference, even though they were the second nation in the world that time. NIKOLAI IVANOVICH, this is the man that wanted to introduce it to Russia, but Russia never sent their army. He just wanted to do it as his own initiative, but there was no Russian government involvement or army to that effect. According to a group of authors of the study, The Impact of Colonialism on African Economic Development from the University of Tennessee, the goal of colonization was exploitation of physical, human, economic resources in favor of a colonizing country. Intensification of colonization and division of Africa by European states altered natural development of the African economy. One of the consequences of colonization, as noted by scholars from the University of Tennessee, was submission of African economy to the interests of Europe. In particular, this meant that locally produced goods were substituted by goods produced in Europe. You know, personally, I know that God allowed all these things. Because if God had not allowed this, there is no way the gospel would have gotten to our people. We needed humility, and we needed to be broken for the gospel to get to us and for us to come back to the God of our creation, and from there to come back in the circle of history to become a leading continent and a leading people again. That is, the colonies have turned Africa into a source of raw materials and solely a consumer of European goods. Production that would have ensured a stable national economy did not evolve, but was suppressed. And this caused a gap between technological development between Europe and technological development between Europe and Africa. The economic objectives of colonization were to maximize economic benefits for the colonies at the lowest possible price. As a result, even those parts of Africa that were economically self-sufficient before the colonization were subordinate to European foreign economic policy. For the main colonizers, the British and the French and the Germans, immediate needs of the colonies were not important. In return, total control of production process was established. Europe at that time rapidly evolved and decided to meet its needs at the expense of Africa's natural resources. Quality of production in Africa wasn't improving, and they couldn't engage in marketing themselves. The fate of African economy was totally dependent on European demand. As pointed out by English Academy fellow, professor and researcher Roland Oliver, the colonies considered development of education in Africa irrelevant. I mean, these are the colonial masters. And unnecessary, and it was carried out only on a private level. Despite the fact that Europeans witnessed beautifully constructed streets and roads, cultivation of various grains, production of magnificent suits, rule of mighty kings, rich industry, this is what they met when they got to Africa. But what the Arabs meant was even greater, because they met the first university, for example, in Bukwuktu, the one I spoke about. They met the civilization that they later used to develop Arab culture and Arab Islamic studies. So despite the fact that the Europeans witnessed beautifully constructed streets, like for example, when they got to Benin City in Nigeria, they were ashamed. They were saying that there was no city that was well planned like that in Europe. And then when they got to Yoruba land, they were surprised that 40% of Yoruba people that time were living in cities. At that time, only less than 20% were living in cities in Europe. So they meant constructed streets and roads, cultivation of various grains, production of magnificent agricultural fruits, and this magnificent suits, rule of mighty kings, rich industry and civilization of Africa. After the destructive consequences of slave trade and colonization, it was propagated that Africans had never been civilized. And that is because they needed to use the propaganda to, to justify what they were doing before their own population at home. In addition, history books often overlook the fact that during the colonization of Africa and turning its inhabitants into slaves, Africans demonstrated military resistance. This struggle was usually headed by African kings. European authors prefer to call them chiefs to belittle them in comparison to European kings, but many Africans were indeed kings with thousands of years of ancestry. Throughout the 19th century, the Anglo-Ashanti Wars took place between the British Empire and the Ashanti Federation. The territory of present-day Ghana, there were 11 main wars, and the Ashanti people won them all. But the last one that led to turning Ashanti into a British colony was the one they lost. And that's how Ghana became the colony of Great Britain. During these wars, Ashanti generals stopped the British invasion and caused respect for power of their kings. They may be called generals because they outranked British generals who could not conquer them. It took them about 100 years to finally get them conquered and submitted. JAJA, the king of Opobo State, the territory of present-day Nigeria, resisted the takeover. He is considered the father of Nigerian nationalism. This is in the modern day in Rivers State, I suppose. Mohammed Ahmad, the ruler of a state on the territory of Sudan, was a thorn in the British flesh. He freed Sudan from British rule, which allowed the country to remain free for 11 years. SAYYID MOHAMMED ABDULLAH HASSAN. You remember why are they Muslims? Because at that I told you that 1,000 years earlier than the white people, the Arabs had gone even before they became Muslim. They have gone there and to Africa. So they had made these people Muslims before the colonization started. SAYYID MOHAMMED ABDULLAH HASSAN, the founder of a dervish state on the Somalia territory, remained undefeated for a quarter of a century. Behanzin, the king of Dahomey, the territory of present-day Benin and Togo, seeing that the French were gradually trying to turn Dahomey into their colony, was not afraid to resist them during two Franco-Dahomeyan wars. Samori Touré, the founder of Wassoulou Empire, the territory of present-day Mali, resisted the French colonialism for 18 years. The French called him Black Napoleon from Sudan. Similarly, in South Africa, there was a struggle against the rule of Europeans. This shows that for more than a century, African nationalist warriors outrank the best minds of European military in maneuvering, tactics, and ability to conduct war. We have discovered two sides of Europe in times after the Middle Ages. On one hand, we have seen prominent people of African descent who developed the European civilization. On the other hand, so Africans were developing Europe, but Europe were conquering our people. On the other hand, the barbaric way Europeans were treating people of Africa. Further, we will assure ourselves that even the centuries-long oppression of blacks failed to destroy their potential or to stop their influence on European and world civilization. Yeah. So please go and share this message. Share. And I'm going to show you a film and a video after this. But besides that, if you want to join our mentorship program, go to sunlightelijahblog.com/mentorship. If you want to go back with us to Africa to build a great Africa, go to sunlightelijahblog.com/mentorship, same blog. If you want to, /Nigeria this time. Mentorship is when you want, if you want to do mentorship. This time, if you want to go to Nigeria, it's /Nigeria, sunlightelijahblog.com/Nigeria. If you want to get my books, same sunlightelijahblog.com/books. If you want to come for History Makers training with me, it is the same sunlightelijahblog.com/HMT, which is HMT, History Makers training. But right now, let's go ahead and see the video, and you'll be able to learn more. Thank you so much. Peace.